What's up guys? Recently, I've been trying out a lot of different builds that do not use any uniques or grizzly rage, and this was one of the better builds I tried out. I really wanted to dip my toes into the shapeshifting side of the Druid because most builds focus on either just werewolf or just werebear. I felt that there were some strong tools that you could really take advantage of, so I wanted to try them out. I also wanted to revisit Pulverize and see if maybe I could fix some of the spirit and single target issues that I had with it. This doesn't solve either of them completely, but it felt much more enjoyable for me to play. The main goal of the build is to shift back and forth between werebear and human form with Pulverize and Stormstrike. With things like Inner Beast, Abundance, and Clarity, we're actually able to get our Pulverize to 25 spirit cost and make it so that we generate 25 spirit when we Stormstrike. Some of the other bonuses we gain from shifting back and forth include damage reduction from Iron Fur and Heightened Senses, healing and fortify from Skinwalker, and big damage and crit buffs from Quick Shift, Natural Balance, and the Shapeshifter glyph. Our goal is to shift back and forth between Stormstrike and Pulverize as fast as possible. We're not going for big singular Pulverize hits, but rather much faster and more consistent Pulverize damage, while also still having the option to spam Pulverize if we want to. We still have Umbral in the build, so we can easily keep our Spirit up with Quicksand on Pulverize. We also have Poison Creeper to generate Spirit with Umbral, and Petrify has a bonus that whenever we kill, we get 25 Spirit, allowing us to spam Pulverize as well. The build feels incredibly tanky with all the sources of damage reduction we get, and how easy it is to heal and fortify with Skinwalker. I think one of the big downsides is because we're constantly swapping forms, it's very difficult to use any buffs that are specific to werewolf or werebear. Luckily, we can still use survival instincts for some solid execute damage. I think the build has been really fun to kind of see a different side of Pulverize and the Druid as a whole. There's a lot of pretty strong shapeshifting synergies, but unfortunately they're still overshadowed by builds that focus on one form. I'm honestly not sure what is still missing to make a shapeshifting build stronger aside from just bigger numbers. I think a lot of the mechanics are actually well made and pretty interesting. Everything in the build meshed together really well and made a lot of sense. I just wasn't quite seeing the damage I would have wanted to see. This might also just be a problem with the meta builds being too strong at the moment, and if they see a nerf, a shapeshifting build is looking pretty juicy. As always, I want to remind you guys to make sure you check out the notes section in the D4 builds. Sometimes I just throw some random stuff in here. This one I kind of had some just kind of notes that I was keeping as I was going along. And always make sure you're mousing over the gear slots. I try to put the stats that you want to look for on them. Usually it's best to worst, but don't stress too much about it. Taking a look at our skills, we have Stormstrike as our basic attack. Pretty much going to see this in all Druid builds. And we have the upgrade all the way to vulnerable. This is pretty nice because once we have the exploit glyph go off, this is going to be our main way of keeping vulnerable up on a target, and we're constantly casting in between Pulverize, so it feels good anyway. In here, we have Pulverize maxed out. Behind it, we have Overpower for 12 seconds. We don't really focus on Overpower, so that's not too big of a deal. But here I actually took the enemies hit with Pulverize deal 20% reduced damage for 4 seconds, which really helps lend into that tankiness we build up. Here we have a pretty interesting thing I've been kind of testing where we have 2 points in Abundance and 1 point in Wild Impulses. The idea behind this is you can see my Pulverize is 36 spirit cost, and then after Inner Beast, it'll be 25 spirit cost. What that means is it only takes me 3 Pulverizes to max out Ancestral Guidance. If I put in more points, it could go down to 24, making it so that it costs 4 Pulverizes. So the points here in Abundance makes it so that at my current intelligence level on my character, I actually can go spirit neutral, alternating Pulverize and Stormstrike. I will spend 25 with maxed out Inner Beast, and then Stormstrike along with Clarity will generate me 25, so it's pretty cool. Down here we have Earthen Bulwark with Unstoppable. It's a pretty good cooldown, just under 10 seconds with my current cooldown reduction. I can get it a little lower, not too bad, but definitely need that Unstoppable for later in the game since we're not running Grizzly Rage. Here we have Poison Creeper all the way up to here because we want the longest duration of the poison as possible. We are getting resets through pack leaders, so that is pretty important, but this still makes it feel pretty good. Here, this is what I was talking about with Clarity. Once you get a high enough intelligence percentage, you can get up to 7. You can see what my current is. I have 13.3% increase resources generated. So this will actually go from 6 to 7, and then Storm Strike will go all the way up to 18 with all the buffs. So you can get 25 spirit back. Pretty cool. Down here we have 1 point in trample. This is our other unstoppable. Pretty important, if you're not playing Grizzly Rage, to have unstoppables in the build so you can get out of CCs. Here we have the pretty standard earth package. More damage to crowd controlled enemies pretty much. More damage if we have fortified for more than 50% of our life. We're always being fortified. And then here we have 1 point just to get a little extra fortify on crits. Down here we have neurotoxin with envenom. I try to put envenom in every single druid build I play because this is just such an insane damage increase, and we get our envenom poison through poison creeper pretty much, so it's really nice. Moving down here we have petrify, then we have petrify duration increase by 1 second, and then petrify grants 25 spirit on kills. This is really nice because if you want to, you can petrify and then just spam pulverize on everything. You still ideally want to be alternating storm strike between each pulverize, but if you want to just spam pulverize, this allows you to do that. It feels really fun. Over here we have Defiance. Nature magic skills deal 12% increased damage to elites. Our Pulverize is a nature skill. Natural Disaster. Earth skills deal increased damage to vulnerable enemies. We're playing vulnerable with Storm Strike and Exploit, so this is great for us. And then Resonance. Every time we attack with opposite type, we get triple the bonus here. So we Storm Strike, and then our next Pulverize, because it'll be Earth, gets 18% increased damage, which is really cool. Then we have kind of the similar thing down here. When a shape-shifting skill transforms you into a different form, it deals 15% increased damage. So we're in human form with Storm Strike, and then we shape-shift with our shape-shifting skill Pulverize into bear form, and it's always going to have 15% damage as long as you Storm Strike in between. Here we have Heightened Senses. As we're shape-shifting in and out of bear, we're constantly regaining this damage reduction buff. Down here in our capstones, you actually have a choice. I've been running with Ursine Strength. It gives a little bit of defensive properties along with a very consistent damage. I thought this felt pretty fun to play with. Your other option is to go Earthen Might. Either one is fine. I'd say try them both, see which one you like more. Earthen Might will give you a little more spirit back, but I didn't really have too many spirit problems with this build at my level, so maybe Earthen Might will perform better if you're having spirit issues. Consider that. You're going to have tons of opportunities where the target is immobilized with Poison Creeper, and you're going to be critting, so this should have very, very high uptime, and it's going to feel pretty good. Next, taking a look at the gear on our helmet. I've actually been trying out Skinwalker with this build, and I've been really impressed with it. It's really good out of the codex once you get to a high level, so you can see I'm healing for almost 600 health every time I shift form, which I'm constantly doing. And then if I'm max health, I actually gain this as Fortify instead, which is one of our main sources of Fortify. Cooldown reduction, armor, willpower, and maximum life. I have a pretty good helmet for this build, and it's felt pretty good. Down to the chest piece, I have just the codex version of Might on here, but you can get it all the way up to 6 seconds, 20% damage reduction. We're constantly using Storm Strike, so this is always up. You're going to be looking for tons of defenses on your chest piece. I like life, armor, and damage reduction. On our gloves, currently this is where I have Ursine Horror, which makes it so our Pulverize is an earth skill, which gives us access to nature and earth buffs, which is very important for the build. Ranks to Pulverize, attack speed, willpower, crit chance. This is what I have for now. You could run crit damage instead of like willpower or attack speed, whatever you feel. Not too big of a deal. Pants, we have another defensive slot. This is where I have my disobedience currently. Same thing, life, a bunch of damage reduction, and armor. It's felt the best for me so far. Down to the boots, I currently have ballistic on here, which is +2 ranks to earth skills when we have fortify, which we always have fortify, so that's very nice. Move speed, damage reduction while injured, willpower. And then the last one, you can go for dodge chance. The one thing I will say, if you're trying to keep ancestral guidance maximized, do not put spirit cost reduction on here because it will mess that up. It's not too big of a deal, but it will be a little inefficient. On the weapon, I don't have a great weapon for this yet, but currently I have accelerating on here. We like attack speed in this build because we want to constantly be alternating between Storm Strike and Pulverize and pretty much spamming Pulverize. Vulnerable damage is really important. Willpower, crit damage, core skill damage, damage to crowd control enemies, damage to poison enemies, damage to close enemies. You've got some options to work with here. I would say try to maybe get some crit damage. I don't have that yet on this weapon. On the necklace, not great necklace. This is kind of the necklace I use with all my builds just because it's got 3 ranks to envenom and pretty decent cooldown reduction. Those are the 2 most important things you want to look for on your necklace. Envenom is multiplicative. It's very, very strong, very good. Cooldown reduction is always quite good as well. The other two stats, you can just look for anything that does damage or damage reduction depending on which way you want to go. Here is where I actually have my Shockwave. I don't have a perfect Shockwave quite yet, but it's really important you put it on your amulet for the bonus damage. On my ring, I have Umbral. I've gone back and forth on Umbral. I think you really technically don't need Umbral because I have it set up to where you'll go spirit neutral if you go back and forth between Storm Strike and Pulverize. So you could totally go for something like Retaliation here, which would be plenty fine. I think this makes people really enjoy Pulverize much more though when you have Umbral, because this still will work on things like Poison Creeper and Petrify. When you use them, they'll get you Spirit back. The thing is, if you want this to give Spirit back on Pulverize specifically, you'll need to put Quicksand on one of your pieces of gear. So that would probably entail dropping Skinwalker and putting Quicksand on instead for better spirit management. I was pushing into a little bit harder stuff, so I wanted to go with Skinwalker, so that's why I dropped Quicksand, but keep that in mind. Moving down here, we have Natural Balance. Whenever we use our Storm Strike, our Earth skills will have more crit damage. On the rings, I liked Life, crit damage, crit chance, vulnerable damage. You don't really care too much about Lucky Hit in this build. You can get it, but I thought this felt pretty good. On my totem, I have Crash Stone currently. I can't decide if I like this or not. Here's where you could also put Retaliation if you don't want to use Crash Stone. Biggest thing is you want to get cooldown reduction. I have Lucky Hit on here. Ideally, that would be crit chance instead of Lucky Hit. But yeah, so Crash Stone, it's felt okay so far, not too bad. For the gems and our armor, we have damage reduction while fortifying. In the weapons, I'm currently going critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. You could also go critical strike damage to crowd control enemies, whichever you feel like you have better uptime on. And then in the jewelry, we have armor with our skulls. For our elixirs, for offense, you're looking at assault for attack speed or cruelty for crit chance. And then for our defensive elixirs, fortitude for maximum life or iron skin for armor. In the spirit boons, in deer, we have wariness, damage reduction against elites. For eagle, I've kind of been going back and forth between attack speed and critical strike damage. Since this is not a rampaging build, we do want flat critical strike damage. So this is kind of where I've been at for now. Down here, we have pack leader. This is what's going to get us resets on poison creeper, which will help keep our poison benefits like envenom or heightened malice up constantly. So this is really important. Then down here we have Masochistic, which is a large amount of our healing because Pulverize is a shapeshifting skill. So whenever it crits, it'll heal for us. And then Calm Before the Storm. Again, we're not focusing on Lucky Hit, but this is still going to get you a good amount of procs, which will have you pretty good uptime on Petrify. Lastly, taking a look at the Paragon tree, pretty straightforward. We move on up through the starter tree into our usual exploit glyph. I always recommend this for Druid builds in the first tree. You can always switch this out later if there's a board with better dexterity, but you always want to aim for this first. Get this up to level 15 if you need to, but make sure you have this bonus activated. It'll be the highest damage increase you'll see on all your builds. Then I move on up in here to the Heightened Malice board. Remember, we're using Poison Creeper a lot of the time, so that's where we're going to get the 3 enemies poisoned nearby for us. Then we move on over here to Fang and Claw. Nearby enemies will take increased damage, pretty much always nearby with us because we're trying to get the double hit with Pulverize and Shockwave. Then what you want to do is you want to make sure you go to the right over to the inner beast tree. The reason we're doing this is we want to make sure we're getting the correct rare node bonuses. So as we move into this tree, we can see we have Undaunted here. So we have increased damage reduction the more fortify you have, and then we do more damage while we have fortify. We always have fortify, so that's really important. We move through some nice armor and life nodes here, critical strike damage and physical damage. You can see we want to make sure we hit these. And then we have the inner beast node. This is really important because we're constantly swapping back and forth between human and bear form. This will have 100% uptime, making our Pulverize down to 25 spirit cost, which is really important for maintaining our spirit. Then you want to make sure you come down to the Thunderstruck board next. The reason is you can see here, we aim for 440 intelligence so we can get increased damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. And then we can also get additional critical strike damage for the build. So that's really important. You come to this board third. You probably won't be able to hit the int until you're quite high level, so don't worry too much about that. But here we have the Shapeshifter glyph. This has actually been pretty interesting. Shapeshifting has a 20% chance to cause a skill's damage to critically strike. It's been pretty noticeable when I tried with or without this glyph, and I've really liked it so far. Then once you do that, you can move up into either of these boards. I'd say go ahead and pop into here. We have Survival Instincts. And the reason I said that is if you can get high enough willpower, you can see here, I've actually activated a node on my 4th board, which is pretty cool. Not often can you do that. So we get a little bit of extra damage reduction while fortified here. Survival Instincts basically kind of works like an execute. As the target goes lower in health, you'll continue to do more and more damage, which is pretty cool. Then we'll move over here into Territorial Glyph, increased damage to close targets and damage reduction against close targets while always close. Earthen Devastation, our skills deal increased damage to enemies afflicted by crowd control. We're applying tons of CC with Poison Creeper and Petrify and things like that. So this is gonna feel pretty nice. And then finally, I move over here to Ancestral Guidance, which is where we wanna maintain that 25 spirit cost on Pulverize so we can keep this up a lot of the time. If you want, you can grab a point from somewhere and toss it in here. This will give you 2 spirit on kill. So if you're noticing you're having spirit problems, make sure you put a point in here. That's going to be it from this build. It's been a pretty interesting journey trying out some kind of different stuff, trying again to go for no uniques, no Grizzly Rage. I think there's definitely some cool tools out there for shapeshifting. I think it's probably still missing something, or maybe just being able to use all of Lightning, Wolf, or Bear and Earth in one is just too strong at the moment. I think this will be pretty cool if those do get nerfed, but until then, it's probably just okay. Great mid-game build that was pretty fun to try out and play. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.